Undercover boss orders toast, freezes when waitress says she goes to bed hungry every night. A rainy morning and a man walks into a diner not to have breakfast. The dim glow from the neon sunrise diner sign shimmered on the rain-speckled pavement, casting pale blue reflections across the damp, quiet street on the outskirts of the city. A silver gray car pulled gently to the curb. The door opened. A man stepped out, hands tucked into his coat pockets, head bowed beneath the brim of a faded baseball cap. Ethan Carter, 40 years old, CEO of the Sunrise restaurant chain. But this morning, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a stranger. A dark gray hoodie draped over his tall, lean frame, faded jeans, unbranded sneakers. Nothing about him resembled the public image of a man who once gave keynote speeches at regional food industry conferences. And that was exactly the point he didn't want to be recognized. He pushed open the door. A soft ting from the bell above sounded crisp in the drowsy air, as if nudging the room awake. Inside, the light was warm but dim. The scent of roasted coffee, smoky bacon, and freshly baked buttery pastries lingered in the air, familiar, comforting, but something was missing. A beat slightly off rhythm. No one paid attention to him. No curious stares. No signature sunrise smiles first greeting. Just a distracted nod from the waitress as he sat at a small table near the front counter. "One toast and a black coffee," he said, his voice raspy like someone who had just returned from a long night drive. She jotted it down quickly. No follow-up, no small talk, not cheerful good morning. Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes slowly scanning the diner's corners. No detail escaped him. The employee of the month board still stuck on last month's name. The coffee machine humming faintly, its maintenance light blinking red. Condensation clouded the bottom edge of the drinks fridge. Small signs, but enough for him to know things weren't being cared for like they used to be. Each Sunrise branch had once been a benchmark known for attentive service, consistent food quality, and a strong sense of community. But recently, internal reports flagged this location as slipping, revenue declining, staff quitting unexpectedly, customer reviews increasingly inconsistent, and strangest of all, radio silence from the regional manager once known for sending regular updates. Ethan didn't come to review the menu. He came to uncover the truth. A cup of black coffee had just been placed on the table. Steam rose quietly. He didn't rush to drink, just watched. At the next table, an elderly couple ate breakfast in silence. Further away, a group of delivery workers huddled together, eating while scrolling through their phones. At the corner of the counter, a young waitress was tapping on her phone instead of cleaning. And behind the swinging door leading to the kitchen, a burst of laughter echoed unfamiliar and unprofessional. Ethan touched the coffee cup, hot, but not enough to ease the unease simmering in his chest. He was certain of one thing: the atmosphere here had changed. And if things kept going this way, Sunrise would no longer be Sunrise. He didn't know exactly what had gone off track. But this morning, by blending into the most ordinary of moments, Ethan Carter began the journey to reclaim the identity he had once laid the foundation for. And he had no idea that a simple slice of toast would be the starting point of a truth so painful. A careless remark, and Ethan's whole world paused. A plain white plate was gently placed on the table. On it, 2 golden slices of toast, next to a small pat of butter and a jar of strawberry jam just beginning to melt. The waitress turned to leave when Ethan spoke, his voice as light as a breeze across the early morning. "You look tired. Night shift?" The girl paused for a second, then turned back, offering a small smile, the kind of smile service workers wear when they've grown too used to hiding everything behind politeness. "Pretty much, sir," she replied, voice just above a whisper. Her name was Anna, according to the faded, crooked name tag pinned to her apron. Early 20s, perhaps. Her eyes still carried youth, but something within them no longer belonged to that age, like a flame half extinguished. Ethan returned a polite smile. He picked up a slice of toast, gently spreading butter over it, but his eyes stayed fixed on the girl weaving her way between tables. She didn't move slowly, nor did she rush, but every motion seemed powered by just enough energy, no more. When she returned to refill his coffee, Ethan softly asked, "You've been working here long?" "Almost 2 years, sir," she replied, without the slightest sign she wanted to share anything more. But then, as if she had accidentally forgotten there was a stranger sitting in front of her, Anna let something slip. Her voice slid past the shell of politeness, revealing a corner of the truth. "I'm fine. I've gotten used to falling asleep on an empty stomach anyway." Ethan's hand froze midair. The slice of toast slowly returned to the plate. The sound it made was so faint no one could hear it, but inside his head, That sentence struck like a bolt of cold lightning. It wasn't a complaint, not a cry for attention. No anger, no bitterness, just a truth dry and stark, as if it were simply a part of life, like brushing your teeth before bed. Ethan stared at Anna for a long time. She had moved on to another table. Each step still brisk, still on time, still by the book like a well-trained server. But to him now, she wasn't just an employee anymore. She was the first to speak up, even if unconsciously. The first piece of the truth he was searching for. The coffee in his cup was still hot, but Ethan didn't drink. He was thinking about all the meetings he used to lead the ones filled with talk of increasing efficiency and cutting operating costs. He remembered the reports full of metrics where Anna was just a random employee ID buried among hundreds of rows of data. And now, that ID had just told him she was going to bed hungry. Inside the very diner chain, branded as warmth and service from the heart, Ethan turned his head to the window. The rain still fell gently. Water streaks stretched across the glass like the knot forming in his throat. He didn't know it then, but that one simple sentence was when everything changed. And he knew clearly, this undercover visit would not end with just one breakfast. Tiny cracks, but as soon as Ethan touched them, they spread across the entire wall. For more than an hour after that, Ethan barely took his eyes off the restaurant's movements. He wasn't observing like a CEO checking performance anymore, but like a man who had just realized the house he built might be rotting from the inside. Anna still moved smoothly between tables, but it was clear she was always handed the toughest assignments. Every time a new group of customers walked in, especially ones with children, large parties, or complicated orders, that section was automatically given to her. The others? Different. They strolled. Sometimes they'd carry an empty tray, casually chat near the counter, then slowly return to their tables. Ethan took note of everything, carefully, silently. No hasty judgments, but every detail was starting to connect on its own. As the crowd began to thin out, he stood up, pretending to look for the restroom, but in truth, he was heading toward the back of house to inspect the behind-the-scenes area. The prep kitchen door was ajar, and right then, voices from inside rang out clearer than he expected. Last night I had to work until nearly 11. Still got counted as a regular shift. Totally normal here. Overtime without pay is the default. Another voice cut in, lower, more restrained. Do you know how much less we get in tips compared to the ones assigned to the POS system? One night I served nearly 10 tables, and my end-of-shift tips were less than half of Ryan's, and he only handled 2 tables, all single diners. Ethan froze behind the door. Each word cut like a blade into the same hand he once used to sign off on the automated and fair tip distribution policy just a year ago. That system was designed to prevent exactly this, to stop anyone from monopolizing the POS machine, to eliminate favoritism among servers. Each order, whether paid in cash or card, was supposed to be logged, and the day's tips distributed proportionally to the number of orders served by each person. But now, he understood, something had been broken. Not the system, but the integrity of those running it. The same girl from earlier, Anna spoke again, her voice soft, almost as if she were talking to herself. One time, I got just $4 in tips for 6 hours of work, but I didn't dare ask. They said if you question it too much, you won't get assigned to the good sections anymore. Ethan leaned gently against the wall, closing his eyes. In that moment, Anna's face flashed through his mind, her slender frame, the ill-fitting uniform, worn-down shoes, and that painfully simple line, "I've gotten used to falling asleep on an empty stomach anyway." Now, it all became clearer. It wasn't that the girl was lazy. It wasn't that the customers were stingy. It wasn't even that times are hard and everyone's feeling the pinch. It was that someone was abusing the power of scheduling to manipulate the system. Ethan returned to his table, but the breakfast had long gone cold. He stared at the now limp slice of toast and saw in it a piece of a system he once believed in and which was now being stolen from within. Every misallocated tip is a wage being suffocated. Every unrecorded overtime hour is a stolen piece of someone's life. And Anna, along with many others whose names never appear in internal reports, were the ones silently enduring it all. Ethan clenched his fist, not out of rage, but because he knew, from this moment on, this was no longer just an internal audit. This was an investigation, and he would follow it through to the end. Ethan left the diner shortly after. No scene, no attention drawn, but inside his head, his thoughts were burning. In his car, he opened his personal laptop. The Wi-Fi signal outside the diner was weak, but just strong enough to access Sunrise's internal system. With the highest level of administrative access, a level he had nearly forgotten he had, out of blind faith in the operational hierarchy, Ethan began pulling up tip distribution reports by shift. The name Anna R. appeared in last month's report. Her numbers were completely misaligned with the actual number of tickets she had handled. A discrepancy, but clearly intentional. Another name, Ryan T., was labeled as Pause Priority Handler. That title had never been approved in any official Sunrise protocol. Ethan gritted his teeth. The deeper he dug, the more inconsistencies he uncovered, disguised cleverly in the language of corporate administration. Staff optimization during peak hours. Role adjustments based on real-time productivity. Flexible POS assignment protocol. All of it was just a way to legitimize favoritism. Or worse, exploitation. A string of internal emails, hidden from lower-level access, surfaced. In them, the branch manager, a man named Gerald M., was corresponding with the regional coordinator about withholding cash tips to balance internal metrics. One particularly chilling note read, "Anna is quiet and easy to manage. Can assign extra end-of-shift hours, no approval needed." Ethan's throat went dry. This was no longer a minor infraction. This was abuse of power, manipulation, a betrayal of the very system he built to protect the people now being crushed by it. He picked up his phone and quickly typed a message to his most trusted HR advisor, the only member of the leadership team he still believed in. Check immediately. Pause assignment policy for Sunrise Branch number 27. Priority, Anna Nguyen. I'm returning tonight. Call me if anything else comes up. He hung up, took a deep breath. Ethan wasn't the type to panic easily, but there was one thing that made him feel like he was about to explode. Silence. Silence from the feedback system. Silence from the regional management team. Silence from the very employees who had been wronged. No one said anything, because they all thought speaking up wouldn't change a thing. Ethan returned to the same diner that afternoon, but this time, he didn't sit in the corner. He sat at the counter, wearing an old button-down shirt, a different baseball cap, and carrying a thin notebook. No one recognized him, but one person walked past him, made eye contact for just a second, and gave a subtle nod. Sarah, the veteran sous chef, formerly a manager at the flagship branch. No one noticed, but Ethan did, and in her eyes there was something like she'd been waiting for him. During the mid-shift, Ethan overheard a short exchange between two staff members, neither of whom thought a customer nearby would be paying attention. "Manager's off tonight. Let's handle the cash like we used to, yeah?" "Yeah, just don't let Anna see. That girl seems clueless, but she asked me weird stuff the other day." "Relax, she won't do anything." Ethan closed his eyes. Won't do anything. That's what hurt him the most. The culture of Sunrise was never meant to be one where someone didn't dare to speak up. He opened his notebook and wrote a single line on the first page. Fairness cannot depend on spontaneous goodwill. It must be protected by system, by oversight, and by courage. Every system has limits. And sometimes, change doesn't start with policy, but with someone willing to look truth in the eye. The next morning, sunlight poured through the eastern windows of Sunrise Diner Branch number 27. But no one paid attention to the light. Every employee from kitchen to server to cashier stood silently by the main counter. No one knew what was going on, only that they'd been urgently summoned before opening hours. And the man standing in front of them was no longer in a hoodie or faded jeans. He was Ethan Carter, CEO, founder, the familiar face printed on every training manual since day one. But none of them had ever seen this man walk through their doors. Until today, no chairs were brought out, no soft-spoken introduction. Ethan placed his personal laptop on the counter and connected it to the large display screen typically used to show the menu. The screen flickered to life. An unedited video clip played. A voice rang out. Clear and unmistakable. No introduction needed. "I'm okay. I've gotten used to going to sleep on an empty stomach." Anna froze. Her face drained of color. Panic flickered in her eyes. But Ethan didn't look at her, not yet. It continued. The POS data table appeared next. Each shift laid out with employee IDs, tables served, recorded tip amounts, and the discrepancies were glaring. No order duplication or software glitch could explain them away. An internal email thread popped up next. It clearly displayed the line, "Hold back cash tips, internal balancing, prioritize Ryan on POS, Anna, low resistance." No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. Then a still image from internal surveillance showed on screen, a staff member quietly pocketing cash tips into a private drawer, bypassing the POS system. At the exact moment the register status showed, pause temporarily disconnected. Ethan turned the screen off. Then he turned back. His voice was low but resolute. "Some people here have used their position to manipulate and steal from others. The system was built for fairness, but it's been twisted by greedy hands. Today, I'm not here to issue a warning. I'm here to put an end to it. All eyes turned to Gerald, the shift manager. The man turned pale. Before he could react, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and, after reading just a few lines, he understood. A formal suspension notice had already been sent from HR. No more words were needed. Ethan walked slowly toward Anna. She stood at the back, hands trembling, eyes cast downward, looking on the verge of tears, not because she was being called out in front of everyone, but because she couldn't understand how one offhanded comment from the night before had led to this very moment. Ethan stopped in front of her, his gaze softening. For the first time, he wasn't the CEO. He wasn't in disguise. He was just an adult looking into the eyes of a young person who had been trying to live decently in an unjust system. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse, "that this system forced you to endure in silence. But starting today, it will change. With clarity, with action, not just promises." Anna looked up. She said nothing. But in her eyes, for the first time, there was something like trust. A wave of silence spread across the kitchen. No one moved. No one dared to breathe too loudly. In those few short seconds after Ethan's apology, the only thing present was a heavy feeling of acknowledgement, of a promise that must be kept. Then, unexpectedly, footsteps approached from the prep counter. Sarah, a longtime kitchen staffer, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, stepped forward, pulled off her rubber gloves, and looked Ethan in the eye. "Mr. Carter," she said steadily, "I've seen this happening for months. I've been documenting it quietly, not out of fear, but because I didn't know who I could trust. But now I think maybe it's time to bring it out." She placed an envelope on the counter. Ethan opened it. Inside were printed screenshots of internal messages between the manager and a floor coordinator, hand-marked shift schedules with red ink dividing easy sections and low-tip sections, along with specific names and a manually retrieved camera log from the kitchen terminal. A supporting piece of evidence, but this time, it came from inside. Voluntarily, bravely, Ethan nodded to Sarah, his eyes lingering on the handwritten note at the bottom. "Sometimes justice has to be cooked up right from the kitchen." A soft footstep, a hoot. This time from the back door, where delivery staff typically come and go. A young employee, around 19, named Jason, stood hesitantly, as if wanting to speak. Ethan gave a slight nod. Jason swallowed hard, then said, I didn't really know how the tips worked. But one time I heard Ryan say, doesn't matter if the customer tips, as long as someone in the kitchen cooperates. I didn't understand what that meant then, but now I do." The whole restaurant fell silent again. Ethan turned to the rest of the staff. "Anyone who has ever been discriminated against," he said slowly, "forced to work unpaid overtime, pushed out of the easy section because you weren't someone's favorite, write it down, today, on paper, and sign your name. I will protect you." No one responded immediately. But then, a young girl, her hair neatly braided, named Lonnie, quietly stepped out of the line, took a pen from her shirt pocket, and walked over to the whiteboard, usually used for shift schedules. She wrote the very first line, "Evening shift, 6/5, 4 hours unpaid, tips shared, $0, reason, no POS access." Then came the second person. Then the third. Ethan stood still, saying nothing more. He didn't need to. Those written lines were doing the work of truth. And that truth was now rebuilding the foundation of the system he once believed to be unshakable. Anna was still standing in the back. But this time, she took a step forward. Her hands still trembled, but her eyes were steady. She didn't write anything. She just looked at Ethan and said, "I don't need compensation. I just want the people after me to never have to get used to going to bed hungry again." Ethan nodded gently. "No one should ever have to get used to that," he said. The atmosphere in the diner was no longer tense like earlier. It had shifted calm, but glowing beneath the surface, like a fresh batch of bread just pulled from the oven. No one had touched it yet, but everyone could feel the warmth was coming back. A single cup of coffee can't change the whole world, but sometimes it's enough to begin a new one. Exactly 1 month since the morning Ethan stood behind the main counter like a living verdict. Everything at Sunrise Diner, branch number 27, had changed. No fanfare, no loud announcements, but deeply and clearly, like soft sunlight filtering through newly cleaned windows. Right at the entrance, the digital screen mounted on an oak column no longer displayed the menu. Now it showed just one line: tip sharing system, transparent, live, protected. Beneath it was a small QR code. Any employee could log into their own account, monitor their own tip distributions, compare invoice numbers, verify check-in times, and flag any discrepancies. No more secrecy. No more quiet favoritism. No more silent control in the hands of those who, knew how to stay silent. Anna no longer worked rotating shifts. She now wore the deep charcoal-colored uniform with red trim, the signature of the management team, but still kept her old smile. Simple, nothing extra. She had just completed the regional leadership training program and would return to this branch as a new staff mentor, exactly as Ethan had proposed in the most recent executive board meeting. And this morning, Ethan returned. No tightly buttoned coat, no baseball cap pulled low over his face, no hidden recorder in his pocket. Just Ethan, the founder, a man with silver-streaked hair, sitting at the same old table by the window. He ordered as if it were the first time, 1 toast and a black coffee, please. The morning sun of a new month streamed gently through the clear glass, casting soft, silk-like light across the spotless table. Anna brought over the coffee. Her hands no longer trembled. She placed the cup down gently and bowed her head slightly. But this time, her gaze didn't waver. It was bright and clear, as if she had finally stepped out from the shadows. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me." Ethan looked at her, for a moment longer than a breath, not to reply, but to acknowledge something deeper. Anna no longer needed someone to see her. She now stood steady in her own light. He nodded, slightly, but fully, like a promise kept. The coffee cup in front of Ethan was still warm. He didn't rush to drink it. He just wrapped his hands around the porcelain, letting the heat seep in, the kind of warmth everyone deserves to feel every day. And he knew what was steaming in that cup wasn't just coffee. It was a reminder, a commitment, a final period to the silence, and a beginning to a just system poured full each day with trust and courage. Because real justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone brave enough to listen, and another brave enough not to look away. Ethan sat quietly in the morning light, his gaze fixed on the freshly poured coffee. The warmth touched his fingertips, not enough to burn, but enough to remind him that he was still touching something alive. Not from the brew, but from people. Behind the counter, a young man in a crisp new apron fumbled a bit as he tried to take the first order of the day. He glanced over at Anna, gesturing a question. Anna walked over, not to fix it for him, not to scold, just nodded, whispered something gently, then pulled a small folded paper from her pocket and handed it to him. The boy held the piece of paper as if he had just received a treasure map. No applause, no celebratory fanfare. Just a quiet moment, but Ethan saw it clearly. Culture was being restored, not through slogans, but through the silent handoff of what is right. Across the diner, a senior waitress, someone Ethan remembered as one of the more resistant to change, was now explaining how to process digital receipts to a new staff member. In her hands was a tablet, the very kind of device Ethan once feared would be rejected for being less friendly than paper. He chuckled softly. True change isn't about technology, it's about the belief that everyone deserves a chance to get better. Suddenly, his phone vibrated in his pocket. A message from HR, branch number 36 just requested rollout of the real-time tip-sharing system like branch number 27. 2 former managers have voluntarily stepped down. Staff voted to appoint a new leader from within. Please advise. Ethan finished reading and didn't respond immediately. He put the phone away and looked out the window where an elderly woman was guiding her grandchild into the diner. Raindrops still clung to their raincoats, but both wore smiles. Sunrise Diner had truly come back. Not because revenue had recovered, but because the way people treated one another had changed. Ethan looked back at his coffee. Beneath the fading steam was a reflection clearer than any mirror. Not of himself, but of the faces who had dared to speak up, who endured, who chose not to walk away. He raised the cup and took a sip. The coffee was still strong, but not bitter, because this time it was brewed with trust and poured by those who truly deserved it. And he knew, whether you're a CEO, a founder, or just a nameless customer, a system is only worth keeping if it never forgets anyone behind the kitchen line.